Good evening and welcome yet again to the Fox 26 Sports Stream, where we'll be talking all things Houston sports and then some. As always, I am Sal Manine, sports producer here at Fox 26. We appreciate you joining us, whether it's on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, or our website, where you can find us at any time, fox26houston.com. We're going to be talking some Stros, some Texans, maybe even a little bit of college athletics. We're just about a week away from the start of the college football season. Actually, some teams will get started later on this week. And then, of course, next week is the final weekend before the regular season begins in the NFL. So we'll get to all that as things roll along. We'll also keep you updated on how things are going with the Astros. They are at Minute Maid Park, getting set to take the field right now. First pitch just minutes away against the Kansas City Royals, a team who, if I didn't tell you that they were one of the worst teams in baseball, you would think that this is the Murderers Row Yankees or the Big Red Machine or one of the great Astros teams of old, the way they've just been able to take care of business against the Astros. So Houston will try to bounce back. It'll be the rookie Luis Garcia taking the bump against Brady Singer. So we'll keep you updated on how things are going up at Minute Maid. We'll start with the Texans, though. Game number 3 of the preseason, the final game of the preseason for the Texans. Remember, they've changed things now. So with the exception of the teams that played in the Hall of Fame game, everyone's only getting 3 preseason games. So the Texans will finally play an exhibition at home. It'll be Saturday night against the defending champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Final game of the preseason under the new regime of David Culley and his staff and new quarterback Tyrod Taylor. Texans are coming off a second win in the preseason, but again, what does wins and losses really mean at this point? Beat the Cowboys up in Jerry World 20-14. Make of it what you will. You don't want to say, all right, they're 2-0. That means this team's going to mess around and make a run at the playoffs. It also doesn't mean, all right, you can definitively say no starters played, so that means they're going to be just completely terrible. Truth is probably somewhere there in the middle. Again, I liked what I saw on the defensive side of things in terms of the system that Lovie Smith and his staff has brought in, and all the players have said they like it a lot more. 4 takeaways in that game for Houston against the Cowboys, including a pick 6 from Lonnie Johnson. That was an issue for the Texans all last year, was their inability to generate takeaways and turnovers on the defensive side. So we're starting to see that that's been a point of emphasis for Lovie Smith since he got here, since day one, and thus far it is paying some dividends for the Texans. So again, I think that the defense is going to be perhaps a little bit better than maybe people thought, or some of the wise guys out there in Vegas. We still didn't see a ton from the first team offense, so it's hard to really get a gauge on what exactly is or is not going to happen in that regard. Running the football did not go as smoothly in this game as it did in that first exhibition against the Packers, but we should see a lot more of the starters this weekend. That's something that David Culley has already said he plans to do. Here he was at practice earlier this week discussing his plans for week 3 of the preseason and what he expects to do with his ones against the defending Super Bowl champs at NRG Stadium.
I want to play them more, for sure. We really want those guys to kind of get a feel for what it's like to go into the second half of a ball game. We haven't had that yet, and so the plan is that to try to take them into the third quarter to kind of see how we handle the adjustment from the first half to the second half.
So again, you should see kind of like you used to see in the old format of 4 preseason games. The third one is where the starters play pretty much the entire first half. Maybe they open up the playbook a little bit more, who knows, but you'll at least see, I think, a lot more of Tyrod Taylor and the starters out there on offense. And then same thing on the defensive side before they make way to a lot of the rookies and the younger guys. Again, this is a very new team if you're a Texans fan in terms of all the free agents they signed, and still no Deshaun Watson. He was at practice today, but was working out separately away from the team. So do not expect that just because this game is here in Houston that he will be suiting up or taking the field in any capacity against the Buccaneers. So that's where things stand with the Texans. We will, of course, have much more on them tonight at Fox 26 News at 9. And, of course, be sure to always be following Mark Berman on Twitter for your most up-to-the-date updates on all things Houston sports, including the Texans. He is at Mark Berman, Fox 26 on Twitter. All right, as for the Stros, again, the game is just now about to start between the Stros and the Royals, and it's been an awkward month and a half since right before that series, right before the All-Star break, that week right before the break. The Stros are a 500 team since then, just 19-19, and you hear guys talk about the dog days of summer, and this isn't anything that's new for Houston. You see it in 3 of the last 4 years, and obviously 17, 18, 19, they were 100-win seasons for Houston. They've had these lulls and these slow periods and these times where things weren't clicking on all cylinders for them. So no reason to be overly alarmed right now, I think. If it was the playoffs are starting tomorrow, then maybe you could say, all right, this team has some issues. Maybe they're not the same team they were at the beginning of the year, but the Astros have had to deal with all kinds of injuries, losing guys to the COVID list, guys working their way back through rehab assignments. Alex Bregman played back-to-back games in Sugar Land. He was at Minute Maid this afternoon, went through BP and some on-field work, and they're going to continue to evaluate him. And he could possibly, all indications are it's got to be any day now that he should be back in the everyday lineup for the Astros. Hasn't played since mid-June as he's rehabbing that quad injury, but he says he's feeling good. He's starting to get hits in his rehab games down at Sugar Land. So it looks like any day now for Alex Bregman to make his return. But again, you look at last year, the Stros went 8-16 down the stretch. And remember, it was only a 60-game season in 2020. So 2 months of the Stros, they actually finished 1 game below 500. But then once the calendar flipped and it was the playoffs and they had that fluky system where kind of everybody got in, they looked like the team that had gone to the World Series the year prior. And there's a reason why last year they went to their 4th straight ALCS. Then you go back to 2018. Between July 9th and August 20th, they were 5 games below 500. 2017, we all remember what happened that year. And again, starting in late July, basically the entire month of August, the Astros really struggled before turning it around down the stretch and were able to get back on track and take care of business when and where it counts. So I don't think there's reason to be super, throw your hands up and everybody think the sky is falling, but obviously there is some concern. And I think a lot of it starts with the fact that this team has not been close to 100% really all year. The team did get back Kyle Tucker from the COVID list today. He's obviously been out for the last week and a half, almost 2 weeks. They did have to put outfielder Chas McCormick on the injured list, though. He hurt his hand in batting practice over the weekend and just it hasn't got right since. So he's going to the IL for the time being. But the rookie Jake Myers has been doing some nice things over the last week or so. And so we'll see. What does this team look like in another week or two as they start to finally get healthy? And if they get Alex Bregman back, and what do they look like throughout the month of September as they hit the stretch run? Fortunately for the Astros, the team right behind them and chasing them in the division, the Oakland Athletics, has been struggling even more of that. They lost again today to the Seattle Mariners, blew a 9th inning lead last night, and then lost the getaway game today. And so that's 9 out of 12 that Oakland has lost. So Houston's lead over the A's in the division is at 4 games. They're 5 games clear of Seattle, who, yes, they lost on Sunday in extra innings, but the first 2 games, they absolutely curb stomped the Mariners. And so I don't think that you have to necessarily worry right now about either of those teams really challenging Houston for the division. So now it's a matter of, can they or anybody catch Tampa Bay for the top record in the American League and home field throughout? That may be a tall order. I think they're 4 games behind the Rays for the best record in the American League right now. But again, they're not at 100%. The teams in their own division are struggling. And so everything is right in front of the Astros to do what they've been expected to do all year long. What is weird is the reason that Houston is in this situation where they've struggled the last 6 weeks or so is they're really struggling against the teams that are not going to be playing postseason baseball. You look at their record against the Orioles, the Royals, the Rockies, the Twins, and the Tigers. These are 5 of the 11 worst teams in all of baseball. So there are only 19 teams that are playing better baseball than these teams. All have losing records. None of them are going to the playoffs. And you see that this is where the Stros have had difficulty, especially as of late. I mean, you look right there in the middle of your screen, the Kansas City Royals have taken 4 out of 5 against the Astros so far this season. We saw AJ Hinch with his new ball club in Detroit, what he's been able to do, taking 5 out of 7 against his old ball club. But that's where the Stros have struggled, which is kind of head scratching, that it's the teams that you wouldn't expect that aren't going to be playing meaningful baseball, that are trotting a lot of guys out there who are either young or are guys that are just kind of in the league right now, in the show, not guys who are all-stars, difference makers that have given the Astros trouble. On the flip side, Houston has gotten the job done against some of the best teams in baseball. If you look at this, they're 17 games over 500 against these 6 teams: the Dodgers, the Rays, the White Sox, the Red Sox, and then Oakland and Seattle. And certainly in the case of LA, Tampa, the Southsiders, and it looks like Boston, those teams are all going to be in the playoffs. Obviously, Boston, the Yankees, and Oakland are going to be battling it out for that wild card. But right now, I believe Boston is a game and a half or 2 games up on Oakland for the second wild card spot. So at the very least, the Stros have managed to take care of business against the good teams. It's the teams that are not so good that have caused them the most amount of trouble this year. All right, so just to update things for you, they just got through the top of the first, and it is scoreless. No hits for the Royals in the top of the first, so the Stros will be coming up to bat. Altuve, Brantley, Jordan are going to be taking their first licks for Houston in the bottom half of the inning. So we will keep you updated as to how things are going there in Houston. Or in Minute Maid. All right. One last thing before we do get out of here, and that was a bit of college news today. If it doesn't totally apply to any of the local colleges or the Texas schools, unless you happen to be a fan of a team in the Big 12, because the Big 12 is not part of the Alliance, as it's being called right now. And that is the ACC, the Big 10, and the Pac-12 have all released statements and all come out and said that they have an agreement in place to work together in terms of basically to curb the influence of the SEC. So they're going to schedule non-conference games against each other, have some marquee matchups, events, preseason tournaments in men's and women's basketball, baseball, softball, things like that. But the big picture is they want to say we're all going to band together so that now that the SEC is this 16-team Super League, we are going to try to advocate on our behalf for our 41 teams that make up those 3, whatever you want to call it, the triumvirate, the alliance as it's being called, but that they're going to try to get better TV deals, better marketing opportunities, and basically whenever the college football playoffs, if and when it does expand, they couldn't even come to a consensus on that among the 3 league commissioners who spoke publicly today or released statements. But whenever the changes are made to the college football playoff, they'll try to obviously advocate on their behalf so that it doesn't just become, well, the SEC is going to get a bunch of bids to the college football playoffs. What's interesting is you've heard for so many years now, people use the term Power 5, talk about the Power 5 conferences. Well, now you have three conferences aligned and one super conference in the SEC, and the Big 12 is left by the wayside. So they are Power Five in name only for the time being, and you can't help but wonder, it's been speculated for a while now, how long until some of the teams in the Big 12 start to get poached by perhaps the teams or conferences in the quote alliance, or if they try to form a new league with the remnants of Conference USA, the American, whatever the case may be. But TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, even the non-Texas schools, Okie State. And then you have to wonder about a school like U of H that for so long wanted to be a part of the Big 12, was doing everything in its power to take steps to make themselves more marketable to the Big 12 as a member. All the renovations they've done on campus, the new arenas, new stadiums, everything that's gone on down there in the last 5, 6, 7 years in terms of increasing the profile of the Cougars to possibly join the Big 12. And now the Big 12 may not even exist, or certainly not as we know it, as things with the quote alliance move forward. The only thing I'll say to wrap that up is nothing has been formalized. There's nothing in writing. There are no contracts signed right now. It's just everybody in the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC saying, we're going to work together. We're in agreement. We want to do whatever we can to keep our collective interests forefront and to basically combat the SEC. But if it ain't in writing, it doesn't exist. So we'll see what happens whenever new television deals have to be negotiated. Again, I mentioned they haven't even all come to a consensus on, do they want to expand the college football playoff? If so, what does that look like? How long does it last? Things like that. Still very open-ended in that regard. So until something is actually in writing and you have contracts written and signed off on, it's hard to really say, all right, this is definitely what's going to happen and it's going to be great for these schools and not great for that, but certainly something to keep an eye on. All right, one last thing, and it somewhat relates to the world of college sports, and that's, if you didn't catch it last night or over the weekend, one of the top basketball players in the city of Houston has made his decision on where he will be continuing his basketball career, and it is not at one of the collegiate powerhouses in men's basketball. We're, of course, talking about Tyler Smith from Fort Bend Bush, going to be a junior this year in high school, had offers from basically everyone, from U of H to Baylor, the reigning champs, Kansas. I mean, everybody's been looking at and scouting this kid. He's been on the scene for quite some time and just wrapped up his sophomore year on the high school circuit and obviously playing AAU and club basketball and all that kind of stuff. But he's tall, he's long-armed, can jump, he can shoot from the perimeter, which is really what you need from a big man these days. I think he's already listed at 6'9" or 6'10", but very long, lanky, athletic, and that's why everybody wanted a piece of him. But he is signed with the Overtime Elite League. That's the new league that is going to start paying high school players to finish their high school education down in Atlanta as part of the Overtime Elite League. But then when they're not taking classes, they're getting paid to train and play basketball year round. And so Tyler Smith reportedly has a 7-figure deal to be a junior and senior academically and then play these 2 years for Overtime Elite. And the goal is to get to the NBA, he says. He joins another top-notch Houston basketball prospect, Bryce Griggs from Hightower, who also reportedly has a 7-figure deal. Bryce is a senior academically right now, and so he'll play at least 1 year in the Overtime Elite League and see what happens in terms of the NBA and his pro potential. Our sports director, Mark Berman, was able to speak with Tyler, his agent, and his family as he made this big decision over the weekend. And here's what the Smiths had to say about how things are changing for Tyler as he is now ready to begin his professional basketball career.
6'10" power forward Tyler Smith, a junior at Fort Bend Bush, decided to bypass a boatload of offers in college basketball and sign with the new league Overtime Elite, which begins play in September. Tyler will finish the remaining 2 years of his high school education, facilitated by Overtime Elite in Atlanta, and get paid 7 figures to play basketball, according to his Houston-based agent, Chris Gaston. Tyler, who signed a 2-year contract with Overtime Elite, is ranked by ESPN as the 8th best player in the country in the 2023 class, 3rd best power forward, and the number 1 player in Texas.
I decided to go to Overtime and become a professional basketball player.
And how come?
Just to get to my goal faster of reaching NBA.
Tyler says he had scholarship offers from
Baylor, U of H, Auburn, Memphis, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Other schools too.
Tyler says among the schools who expressed interest in him include Kentucky, Oregon, Arizona State, and UCLA.
My goal really wasn't to go to college, it was just to go straight to the NBA anyways.
At the end of the day, people think you're going to overtime, you're just dropping out of high school, which is actually the opposite. You're still in high school, you're still taking classes, you're still going to get your high school diploma, but now you're focused on basketball 8, 9, 10 hours a day. I mean, you have nutritionists, you have chefs, you have psychologists. I mean, you have Kevin Ollie, who played at the highest level, won a national championship at UConn. Brandon Williams, who's the general manager of the Sacramento Kings, he's over the program. So it's a lot of high-level people involved in this. And you're surrounded by peers, your peers that are at equal talent level to you.
Gaston, who has known Tyler since he was 8, and his Family First sports firm, represents a number of players, including King star De'Aaron Fox and former U of A star Damian Dotson, who's with the Cavaliers. Gaston says Tyler has a very bright future.
I think this kid has the potential to be a number 1 pick, and he's mature, and I think he's ready to make this leap to be a professional player.
This is something that he's always wanted to do, and it's going to show him that he is Tyler Smith. That, you know, you deserve to be on that next level. This is just a quicker pathway to get there.
It's really inspiring because, like, I feel like I could get to where he at one day. So it's really inspiring and really motivational for me.
I'm very proud of him.
Our thank you to Chris Gaston and the Smith family for their time. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out with the Overtime Elite League. Obviously, more guys go into the G League. We saw Jalen Green, the newest Rocket, skipped college, got paid a lot of money, got the opportunity to begin his pro career early as a teenager in the G League. And so far, all the returns have worked out for him. And so as his rookie year moves along in the NBA, as we get into the first season of Overtime Elite, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, not just for Tyler Smith or Bryce Griggs, but all the kids who will be skipping their high school seasons to go down in Atlanta where the league is based and begin their professional careers. There's a number of 5-star guys who have already been talked about as NBA lottery picks. And so the way that the game of basketball and the draft is changing is certainly going to be at the forefront. And don't forget, next year, the 2022 draft is the first one where the NBA will start allowing teams to once again draft guys right out of high school, a la the late Kobe Bryant, T-Mac, Kevin Garnett, LeBron, etc. So we'll certainly keep our eye on that. All right, one last check of the Stros. Still scoreless, bottom of the first. Houston does have a couple guys on base with 1 out. So we will have the latest highlights for you on Fox 26 News at 9. And, of course, more on the Texans as just a few days left in training camp and the preseason finale this weekend in NRG against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For all of us here at Fox 26, I'm Sal Manine. We'll see you again next week.